Hello everyone, this is Cheap Boy 111, aka Sly Cooper, aka Colt, aka Rarity, and I'm going to be reading this Clopfic called A Most Unexpected Foursome. And then at the end I will give it a rating of 1 to 5 clops. This story, it's a foursome between Gilda, Trixie, and Flim and Flam. This is gonna be fun. Okay, let's begin. Look, all I'm saying is that it's been forever since I've had some action. Trixie sympathizes with your plight, my griffin friend, but I fail to see how lurking in the corner of such an unsavory establishment will assist us in our quest to find mating partners for the evening. The Azamare raised her nose in the air, glowering over the rowdy patrons of the bar while simultaneously doing her best not to inhale the aromas of day-old hard cider, pipe smoke, and scores of unwashed ponies. Despite her best efforts, the scent managed to penetrate her nostrils, penetrate, and the sensation of rising bile forced her to turn her face back down towards the rickety wooden table, her eyes focusing on her own mug that had yet to be drained of any of its foamy, light brown contents. She swore she could see tiny flecks of dirt floating atop the thick head. Thick head. Gilda, on the other hand, had already gone through 2 ciders, and after several loud, rhythmic gulps, she slammed her third empty mug onto the table, which rattled more than Trixie thought was safe. The show pony showed no concern for her companion, however. A year spent on the road with Gilda had proven that the griffin was more than capable of holding her liquor. A clawed fist attempted to stifle a belch, and did so rather poorly. "We just gotta survey this crowd, see if we can find a couple of desperate suckers," said Gilda, her own eyes scanning the admittedly slim pickings that this particular hole in the wall had to offer the 2 females. Wait, Gilda's a female? I'm joking. The unicorn sighed as she joined in Gilda's fruitless effort to locate stallions worthy of her attention. The unkempt crowd that swarmed through this filthy tavern, from the raggedy old ponies who slumped over the counter with hopeless looks in their glazed-over eyes, to the young and foolish stallions who believed that their best chance of winning his attention was to sacrifice any and all control over their mental faculties by drowning themselves in strong drink, held no promise for Trixie. A lack of regular intimacy, however, had led her and her griffin friend to locations like this one on several different occasions, just desperate to find some pony tolerable to take home for a night. Sometimes they were able to find a passable male or 2. Other evenings only led to further loneliness, that was temporarily solved by a self-pleasing hoof or claw. The 2 friends would only engage in illicit activities in the same room if there was a third party involved. Neither of them bore a strong attraction to other females, but as Gilda had said once before, there's nothing gay in a 3-way. Sorry guys, I'm a bit sick. Trixie found her thoughts slipping back in time as she recalled her first meeting with Gilda. Her fairly unfortunate incident in Ponyville regarding the Ursa Minor had left her with little, and she had wandered for several days before ending up in the nearby town of Winnipeg. A random encounter with a griffin in that town's market had quickly turned into something more after the half-lion, half-eagle had mentioned Ponyville with an air of disdain, and their conversation soon extended into friendship, common ground found in their dislike of the town that housed the elements of harmony. Through Trixie's brilliant showmanship and acting skills and Gilda's acrobatic and strong physique, the 2 of them had collaborated to create a new, more vibrant stage show, which earned them enough bits to rebuild their livelihoods as traveling performers. The spectacle had spread from city to city, and while Trixie and Gilda certainly enjoyed putting on the show and earning money, it left them with little time to pursue any sort of romantic relationships. The sound of a shouting griffin snapped Trixie back to the present. She glanced over at Gilda, but the brown-feathered female wasn't looking at her. Rather, she seemed to be calling for the bartender to bring her another round. The Azamare grinned and shook her head. It was becoming clear that tonight would likely end with 2 lonely performers in separate beds. exploring the familiar territories of their own bodies with appendages that were quite used to the task of providing fleeting relief from the ache that bound their solitary hearts. Ah. A few seconds passed before Shadow fell over the table, and Trixie looked up from her side toward the pony obstructing the light. Her vision was met with an olive coat, adorned with a pinstripe vest, and a thin unicorn stallion's face topped by a red and white striped mane poking up from underneath the straw border hat. A white tooth-filled smile adorned his face as he said, "Need another cider, ladies?" Gilda shook her head as she released another smaller burp, sliding her drained mugs toward the eager bartender. Trixie looked at the stallion's face as he swept up the glasses, and she swore that his eyes swept up and down Gilda's form before he turned and trotted back to the counter. She watched the vested pony as he took his place behind the counter, depositing the dirty mugs in the sink before sweeping his vision around the bar's other patrons, flashing the same grin. Just as she was about to turn away, his head slowly swiveled back in the direction of their table, but he didn't notice Trixie's fixed stare. His eyes were elsewhere. The show pony quickly turned to her griffin companion, who was giving the booths and tables nearby another half-hearted sweep. A sly smile crept onto Trixie's face. She turned back to confirm her suspicions, but as the counter came into view once more, her breath caught in her throat. When the Azure Mare and her griffin friend had entered the tavern earlier that evening, their attentions had not been drawn to the proprietors of the establishment, so focused were they on their goal. Trixie herself often cast bartenders in service to the back of her mind when mulling over romantic partners, her pride overriding any emotions. It was a great surprise that she felt her heart's pace quicken slightly when she saw not one, but two olive-coated unicorns behind the bar chatting with one another. At first glance, they were exactly alike. The same bowler hat, identical blue and white striped vest, similar height and build. Seeing, however, Trixie spotted differences both obvious and subtle. While the stallion who had taken Gilda's empty mugs a moment ago was clean-shaven, the newcomer's lip was graced with a thick mustache of red that matched the darker tones of his mane. His hairstyle was also slightly different, a straighter and sharper look as compared to the round edges favored by the other. Trixie watched as the two stallions, who she was sure by now were brothers, interacted. The shaved pony seemed excitable, almost always twitching and moving, while the mustachioed one kept his neck erect, and his head elevated, exuding an air of quiet confidence. He seemed like the older of the two, even though they appeared to be twins. Even though she couldn't make out what was being said over the din of the bar, she saw that the excitable one appeared to be doing most of the talking, while his brother would only respond occasionally. As she observed the pair, she found her eyes drifting to the taller, quieter stallion, her chest flushing slightly with heat as her heart pumped her blood a little more rapidly through her veins. For the second time that night, her thoughts were interrupted by an outburst from Gilda, though this time the words were directed at Trixie. "Hey, Trix, you okay over there?" Trixie rapidly shook her head to clear her mind, realizing that she had no idea how long she'd been watching the two brothers. She felt a slight blush creep onto her cheeks. Yes, Trixie is perfectly fine," she responded with a voice that exuded less confidence than usual. "I was merely thinking." A wicked plan began to worm its way to Trixie's thoughts, and the corner of her mouth turned up almost imperceptibly. Gilda snorted. "Well, unless your thinking is gonna get us a couple of hot dates, I think it's about time we hightail it out of here. This place is full of nothing but dweebs and losers." Huh. This coming from Gilda. Okay then. The griffin began to scoot out of the booth, but an outstretched hoof from Trixie halted her advance. Her grin had widened, the plan fully formulated and ready for execution. "Don't be so hasty to depart, Gilda. There may be some hope for fun tonight." She beckoned toward herself with her hoof, and Gilda leaned down to put her ear next to the azure muzzle of her pony companion. In hushed whispers that were just loud enough to be heard by the griffin, the unicorn shared the entirety of her plan. When her feathered friend pulled her head back, her previously bored countenance had been replaced with a sly grin and a raised eyebrow, and she said in a low voice, "If you're ever If you're up for it, Trix, then I'm down too. Well then, said Trixie with a smirk, consider Trixie to be up and yourself to be down, as you said. She cast a sidelong glance in the direction of the counter. Shall we begin? The tavern's atmosphere gradually calmed as the night wore on. As more and more patrons mumbled their good nights, and either stumbled out the door or let their sober friends find a means of transporting them to where they needed to go. Individually or in groups, the customers eventually departed, until finally only one pair remained. And as the unicorn with a magic wand for a cutie mark seated across from a griffin who looked like she had a short temper. I'll never forgive Gilda. She made Fluttershy cry. Trixie watched as the two brothers busied themselves behind the counter by cleaning dirty glasses and counting the money in the till. She and Gilda hadn't been forgotten. Throughout the night, the bartender ponies had stopped by their table several times, asking if they needed anything to eat or drink while they sat. Their polite declinations had been accompanied by half-lidded gazes with subtle smiles, and the brothers had seemed content to let them remain in their seats for the duration of the night. Closing time, however, was rapidly approaching, and Trixie was tired of waiting. With a nod to Gilda, she stood off her seat and began a slow walk towards the counter, followed closely by the griffin. Both stallions looked up as they approached. Trixie glimpsed a brief flicker in the shaven pony's eyes as he looked at the two companions, but his voice betrayed nothing irregular as he asked, "Anything else we can do for you ladies?" No, that's not it. Anything else we can do for you ladies? I don't know. I guess that's good enough. In her best indignant voice, Trixie said, "Actually, I think the two of you can help my friend and me solve a little debate, don't you, Gilda?" With a little pout of her lips, the other unicorn looked back at her feathered friend. "I hope so," said Gilda with an edge of ferocity in her voice. "Though we both know who's gonna win." She sat back on her hind legs and folded her arms across her chest. Trixie gave her a subtle wink before she turned back to the stallions. "Yes, well, we'll see." The mustache unicorn spoke up. "So what seems to be the problem, miss?" Trixie flashed a confident smile. "You may call me Trixie, and do tell, what are your names?" With a nod, the clean-shaven pony said, "Name's Flim." The other stallion, "Name's Flam." Oh, I sounded British there. And one voice said, "And we're the world's famous Flim Flam brothers." No. He's Flim. We're the world famous Flim Flam brothers. Traveling tales, ponies, non-pare. Oh yeah. They actually just said we're the world's famous Flim Flam brothers. Okay. Always appreciative of a performance, no matter how brief Trixie giggled for a moment. Then said, "A pleasure. The Green Velvet Trixie is glad to make your acquaintance." She pointed a hoop back at the griffin. And then the Trixie's loyal companion, Gilda the Amazing? Oh my god. "Just Gilda is fine," muttered the griffin, offering a half-hearted wave to the two brothers. "Well, Miss Trixie, Miss Gilda," interjected Flim, "how can we help ya?" I don't know. Some very naughty images leaped into Trixie's mind. She pushed them away for the time being and said, well, it would seem that during the course of our evening, Gilda and I got into a little argument. One that we won't be able to resolve without some assistance. Would you boys be willing to help?" "Well, that would depend on the nature of your argument," said Flim. "Don't you agree, Flam?" "Most certainly, Flim," his brother added in that voice that was lower and calmer than Flim's. Fuck. Trixie found it quite alluring. "Why don't you tell us what it is you were fighting about? And we'll let you know how we can help," concluded Flim. The way they seemed to leap in and out of each other's sentences made Trixie smile, and she stole a look back at Gilda to see she also had a grin on her face, so it appeared that she was enamored by the clean-shaven stallion more than anything else in particular. The mayor turned back to the brothers, still smiling, and said, "Trixie's got to hear that." Knowing full well that they four were the only ones left in the bar, she still shifted her eyes left and right, as if on guard against eavesdroppers, before continuing in a quieter tone. "You see, our disagreement arose over a personal matter. Gilda and I have bantered back and forth, but the issue just keeps coming up," she began to stammer. "Oh, for crying out loud," sighed Gilda. as she dropped back down on all fours and stepped forward, nudging Trixie to the side. The Griffin faced the brothers and said, "We were fighting over whether Trixie or me was a better lay." The concerned looks on the brothers' faces swiftly turned to once of confusion, then contemplation. Trixie found herself rather amused by the whole display as she said, "That's one way to put it. Yes. Gilda and I both consider ourselves perfectly capable of sexual partners. Not with each other, mind you, but of course we disagree on whose prowess in the bedroom is greater. We believe the only way to resolve this is to conduct an impartial study." She tilted her head slightly, narrowed her eyes, and curled one foreleg in front of her, giving her best sultry look. "Interested?" Oh, God. Oh, my God. Oh, God. Oh, man, it's about to get steamy. I better get the lotion ready. 2 sets of olive-hued cheeks flushed with red, and 2 square jaws hung slightly agape. Flim and Flam stared dumbfounded for a moment, then looked at each other, and finally back at the 2 girls. Flam raised the hoof and said, If you please, ladies, give us a minute to discuss." Flim added, and deliberate. The brothers held together, and began a dialogue that consisted of hushed whispers and pistachio eyes that shifted their gaze from each other to the 2 strangers who had just propositioned them in their own tavern. Finally, they looked up again, and Trixie saw their answer written all over their faces before they said a word. Flim spoke up. "We've decided that as gentle colts, and as voice cracks, and styling to the highest regard, that it would be quite rude if we did not do our utmost to assist you lovely ladies." Okay. Trixie, maybe, but not Gilda. Come on, man, you can do better. It's freaking Gilda. It's disgusting. She made Fluttershy cry. Flam finished with a sweeping gesture of his hoof towards Trixie and Gilda. The Asmer's breath caught again as the mustachioed stallion's eyes fell on hers and didn't waver in the eager stare. She found her own vision refusing to shift away from those same eyes, something about them drawing her in, engrossing her in the way they softly twinkled when the lights of the tavern caught the entrancing irises. For the third and hopefully final time that night, Gilda's shout broke Trixie's concentration, though this time it was accentuated by a loud clap of the Griffin's front claws. "Well, all right, so our place are yours." Trixie gave her companion a roll of her eyes, though she was still grinning as Flim and Flam's own 2 of these smiles beamed. They're like, yay! I don't know. The walk to the brothers' 1-story bungalow was a short one, and Trixie and Flam didn't say more than a few words during the trek. Conversation was left to the other 2 members of their party, who seemed more than happy to chat a storm about nothing in particular. More than once, Trixie found herself glimpsing Flam's lanky form out of the side of her eye, only to snap back when she realized what she was doing, scolding herself as she began to mentally prepare for the upcoming excitement. Oh. Flim and Flam's house was quaint and sparsely decorated, with only a few pictures hanging on the walls, and those being of the brothers themselves with an odd-looking machine. "Super speedy, started squeezy 6,000. When Trixie asked about it, Flam simply shook his head while Flim said, "Those are better times, Miss Trixie." Further prodding didn't lead to any additional information, so Trixie dropped the subject quickly. Hold on. I took a drink of my pre-Clop Pepsi. Okay, where was I? Ah! And no, I'm not editing this out because I'm lazy. The 3 ponies and 1 griffin soon sat in the living room. Sorry. A fresh kettle of tea with 4 saucers and a small plate of oatmeal cookies set on a tray that rested on a small table in the center of the room. The saucers were shortly filled and disturbed, and the treats were likewise snatched up quickly. The twins were nothing if not gentle colts. Trixie thought as she lounged on a long couch and munched on one of the cookies in silence. "Cookie!" Seated next to her on the couch, Gilda loudly sipped her cup of tea, while across from them in two small but fancy armchairs, Flim and Flam sat with their legs crossed and partook of their own confections. After several minutes of nothing but chewing and sipping, Flim, as he was wont to do... God damn it, typo. That's gonna lose a mark. I don't know. Dude, as he wont to do, spoke. So how shall we go about this then? I would just say forget about it. This is a really bad idea. Well, I figure we can start by having sex, says Gilda as she rolled her eyes. Gilda, the last time I saw you having sex in a Clopfic, you wound up getting muffin pregnant. Yeah. Then again, that fic was hilarious. Seriously, you should all read Sonic Raingasm. It's fucking hilarious, man. Anyway. Flim snickered, but Flame responded in a voice that betrayed no amusement. Gravity Cat's not amused. My brother does bring up an excellent point, Miss Gilda. Simply diving in and giving it our all will do nothing to resolve your disagreement. Exactly, Gilda, said Trixie with a biting edge in her voice. This needs to be orderly controlled. She smiled a wicked smile at her girlfriend friend. Yeah, okay, said Gilda, throwing her forelegs up. I get what you're saying. She put one claw to her chin and thought. Not often I have to think so hard before doing it. As I said, you got Muffin pregnant. I'm pretty sure this is the first time you were thinking. Unless it's been before the Sonic Raingasm. Nah, this is pretty new. This is after Sonic Raingasm. Flim chuckled again, then said, I may just have an idea if you'd all be willing to listen. When no objections were raised, he continued. What if the ladies took turns with Flam and me together? Okay. I can't think of a better way to test your skills than to take two stallions at once, he said as he placed a hoof to his chest and assumed an overconfident look. Especially two so debonair as my brother and myself. The other unicorn groaned, and Flam planted his face in a hoof. That's fucking awesome. But Gilda leaned back and laughed, then said, I like the way you think. Two separate threesomes? I am so down. You guys cool with that? After a moment's hesitation, tentative nods came from both Flam and Trixie. The showman's cheeks flushed slightly red as she began to picture the scene in her mind. When none of them made a move, she turned to Gilda and asked softly, So, which of us should go first? The griffin waved her claw at the eyes of the unicorn and said, I'll do it. With a wink she added, I'll make sure they're too tired to even get to you, Trix. Oh, God. Trixie tilted her head down and stared at her companion, her mouth still upturned. I sincerely doubt that. Seriously, man. Like, wanting to fuck Trixie, okay. Wanting, cause, you know, she is the great and powerful Trixie. But, Gilda? Ew. And how can anyone says it is gay in a three-way? Flam had already levitated the tray with the remainder of their tea and cookies off the otherwise unoccupied table and into the kitchen as Gilda and both brothers rose from their seats. As the two ponies of the griffin stood, a strange kind of tension that had been hanging in the room, either unnoticed or ignored, broke away, and Trixie could almost smell the difference as she watched her friend gingerly step around the table and into the waiting embrace of the brothers. Any sense of trepidation or fear evaporated as the olive-hued brothers threw out their hooves around the griffin's large body, softly rubbing the feathered form. Oh, God. Okay, I got the lotion on standby. Okay. This should be good. Please do not disappoint me. Not surprisingly, Gilda was the first to begin her assault. pressing her beak slowly to Flim's waiting lips as Flim nuzzled her neck and stroked her side with his hoof. Her kiss lasted long, their heads and mouths moving in tandem, and when Gilda finally pulled away, her breasts no more than pants. A thin strand of saliva hung between her mouth and the pony's lingering from one before snapping in two. She switched to Flam, cupping his head in her claws to bring it up to her eager beak. Oh, guys, it's getting hot. Their contact didn't last as long. But Trixie still felt a small tinge of jealousy arise in the back of her mind as she watched her companion make out with the mustachioed stallion. The other unicorn's cheeks reddened as she felt the soft warmth spread through her body as Gilda switched between Flim and Flam, her tongue's activities concealed by the locked mouths, believing Trixie no doubt that they were having a great deal of fun. And because there's two of them. Yeah. You see, for Gilda, it's double the fun. Yeah, let's just hope that this doesn't go into secret butt fun. After several rounds of kissing, Gilda whispered softly into the ears of both brothers, who nodded and gave their one last peck on either cheek before turning their backs to Trixie, and sitting on the table leaning back onto the forehooves. It quickly became apparent to both the mare and the griffin that the brothers were alike physically in another very important way. They're both endowed quite well. Oh God. Trixie blushed even more as she saw the twin members poking out their sheaths and began to extend as Gilda dove in, one claw gently clutching each cock and slowly stroking. She paused at intervals to give a long, slow lick to each rising stallion hood, drawing sharp gasps out of both Flim and Flam as she gave them equal attention. So big. But in the griffin, as the members finally reached their limit, each erection over a foot in length. Oh God! What? What? She could. Then again, that's not as big as Big Mac's. He's like two. Last time I checked, it was like a 2-foot cock. Yeah. There was a Clopfic where Big Mac had a 2-foot cock. I haven't read it because I don't know what the title is, but She continued her soft strokes and lengthy licks, grinning up at the twins as their long tongue moistened each member from base to tip, finishing with a quick flick of the sensitive head. Flynn exhaled and gasped as Gilda began the next phase, her beak slowly engulfing him as she retained her grip on Flam's erection and kept it hard with slow, even strokes. Trixie's eyes widened in amazement as Gilda sunk lower and lower, the entirety of Flynn's cock disappearing into her eager maw. The olive unicorn gasped as her beak reached its base, and she slowly began to withdraw, its member gradually reappearing with a new glisten courtesy of the griffin's saliva. With a soft pop, Gilda released the cock from her maw and began stroking it again, winking at Flam before she turned her head to give attention to Flam's awaiting erection. Well, the heat in Trixie's chest doubled. As she watched the griffin repeat her feat from just a few seconds earlier, engorging the entire male's length in her mouth while she kept the other brother firm with gentle ministrations from her claws. The other unicorn was warming up swiftly now, not only from lusts that begged to be satiated, but also from the same jealousy that had arisen earlier as she saw Flam twitch and heard him moan quick and quietly as Gilda's mouth took him in, then let him back out again. As confused as she was to feel envious of Gilda's position, the extra huge surge of heat in her body was anything but unwelcome, and she began to stroke her own barrel with her hoof, running it along the azure fur with a feather touch and shivering as the sensation of her light touch rippled through her ribs. Stroke her own barrel. While Trixie was moving slow, Gilda was moving faster. As the griffin began to take Flim's length in her beak once more, her claw gripping the base of his throbbing cock. This time, though, instead of swallowing the whole thing, she began to bob her head up and down, her tongue slathering the stretched skin and coating it with her spit, as her claw moved up and down in rhythm, but in the opposite direction of her head. Flim groaned loudly and leaned back farther, his panting breath an indication of the pleasure coursing through his body. Flim hadn't been forgotten, and he looked content as Gilda's other limb maintained its steady caress of his member, which still stood at full attention. As before, though, the griffin soon slowed her head's movement, and with one last slurp of the member that still occupied her mouth, switched to Flam's cock and began the same process again, taking the hard erection into her mouth, and sliding it up and down, her claw working into the opposite direction to heighten the sensation. Flam gasped, but didn't show as much reaction to Gilda's fellatio, though he still let out a low groan as she increased her pace slightly. After swapping back and forth between the two long members a few times, Gilda finally looked up at the two brothers, her claws still brushing gently over their members, now slick with saliva. She licked her lips and said, now that was tasty, but I think you boys are ready for the real thing, am I right?" "Yes, ma'am," said Flim in a breathy voice, while Flam nodded his agreement. "Well then, get off the table already," said Gilda with mock impatience as she finally released her grip of the two sizable members and stood up on all fours, her wings flaring out slightly. The brothers arose from their seated positions, their erections now dangling beneath them as they stood to either side of the table. Gilda hopped up in their stead. The table, the table easily holding her weight, and turning her head toward Flam, raising her backside to Flim and giving a little shake, her tail lifted out of the way to provide easy access. Trixie felt her hoop begin to travel south towards her stomach as she glimpsed Gilda's entrance for the first time. "Oh my God, there's a muffin in there!" A thin trickle of moisture ran down the inside of the griffin's thigh, dampening the fur of her rear legs. That view, however, was soon obscured by an olive-hued muzzle as Flim licked over the eager griffin's slit slowly, eliciting a cry from the sex-starved creature. Flam, meanwhile, gripped his cock in one hoof and began to brush it against the griffin's beak, leaving a small stain of pre-cum. God damn it. That word is so funny. Gilda opened her beak wide, her breath ragged as Flim's tongue continued to run up and down his sensitive slit, and Flam took the cue and guided his member back into the waiting mouth of the female. Rather than letting her do the work, however, he began to rock his hips back and forth slowly, his already wet stallion hood sliding in easily as his forehooves rested on the table to either side of the griffin's head. Trixie watched the scene unfold, her eyes wide and attempting to drink the whole scene in. The living room now smelled of arousal, of desperate need to be satisfied, and Trixie wondered how much of that scent was coming from the griffin on the table, currently being pleasured by two stallions, and how much was emanating from her own body, pouring out pheromones. She felt the pangs of heat surge through her body, as she watched Flam's erection slowly slip in and out of Gilda's golden beak, desiring so much that she could be in the griffin's place. The unicorn's mare's hoof strayed lower, even lower, ever lower, until she brushed against her own dampened folds with a slight yelp. She closed her eyes a moment as she caressed her entrance again, but opened them again when she heard a voice say, "Trixie, wait." It was Flam, his face surprisingly calm given the fact that Gilda's mouth was still wrapped around its member. "We'll get to you soon, isn't that right, Flam?" The other brother withdrew his face from Gilda's sex. What? Gilda's sex, okay, whatever. His nose moistened by her arousal. "That's right, Flam." He rose up onto his hind legs and rested his forelegs on the griffin's back, stroking her at the base of her outstretched wings as he lined up his cock with the griffin's moistened folds. He moved the head of his member along her entrance, slowly rubbing up and down as a cry, muffled by Flam's length inside her mouth, came from Gilda. Came. He leaned forward, poised on the edge of penetration, and said with a mischievous grin, "Here it comes, ready or not." Ready or not. Here it comes, ready or not. Ready or not. Gilda's eyes had just enough time to widen in shock before Flynn slammed his first thrust home. Her shout of surprise caused her mouth to open wider as she lurched forward, instantly taking almost all of Flam's member into her oral cavity, as her brother ponies both cried out at. Just in time, she managed to brace herself against the table to avoid choking on the stiff cock and drew her head back to a more comfortable position. Blim, however, seemed like he would have none of that gentle nonsense, and after only a moment of lingering with his length buried inside the griffin, he pulled back until just the tip remained, and then sent the whole instrument in once again. Gilda's moans as the shaven brother roughly rutted her were more than audible, even despite the stallion hood in her mouth. Soon the two brothers began to settle into a rhythm, swaying back and forth as though they clutched a cross-cut saw on their hooves. Flim would slide into Gilda's slit with a grunt as Flam pulled his member back, and then Flim would withdraw as Flim sent his cock back into the depths of Gilda's mouth, as the griffin and both ponies moaned and gasped as they moved as one. Trixie wanted desperately to tear her eyes away, if only to relieve the tension that was pounding through her body. Each pulse bringing a new surge of heat that ran from her head all the way down to her aching sex. The sight before her, though, was utterly entrancing, and she pinned her hooves behind her back to prevent herself from thrusting them as deep and hard into her nethers as she possibly could, just as she could feel an inkling of what Gilda was surely experiencing at the center of the arousing spectacle before her. The bodies in motion began to increase their pace, both the strained grunts of the stallions and Gilda's muffled moans and cries becoming more frequent. At last, Gilda is gonna come. At last, Flam began to gasp and shout as his legs twitched. After one or two hasty pumps of his hips, he hastily pulled his member from the confines of Gilda's beak, just in time for the first spurts of sticky white semen to shoot out over her head and land on her neck. The griffin leaned her head back and opened her mouth wide to catch the olive unicorn's next shots, an attempt that proved only mildly successful. By the time Flim had finally collapsed back into his chair, his entire load spent, Gilda had only swallowed what looked like about half of its deposit. The rest peppered her face, neck, and hair with tiny blotches of white. Less than a minute later, Flim indicated his own impending orgasm with gasping breaths, and he yanked his leg from Gilda's clutches with a yell as he too unloaded all over her very backside. Does she mean feathery? There. One of his initial shots even striking a wing feather before he imitated his brother with a loud sigh as he fell back into the comforts of his armchair. Gilda lay prone on the table for a while, her breathing heavy, her coat matted with specks of unseemly white before she said, "So how is that for you fellas?" Flam just gave a slight nod while Flynn said, "Quite amazing, Miss Gilda." "Well, quite amazing, Miss Voice Crack. Quite amazing, Miss Gilda." "Yes, well, I hope you're ready for another round after Trix is done with you," the griffin said with a slight tone of anger. "'Cause I didn't get off from all that." With a huff, she slid off the table, which was now moistened slightly by where her lower hips had contracted its surface. "Here go, Trix," Gilda said with a toss of her head, causing some sticky goo to fly off her mane and land elsewhere into the room. "I'm gonna hit the bathroom, wash out what I can." "Down that hall, second room on the left," remarked Flim, pointing with a hoof. "Can't miss it," added Flam. With a dismissive wave of her front paw, Gilda sauntered down the hall, leaving Trixie alone with the brothers. Soon the glaze over their eyes diminished, and they looked at the mirror with a renewed sense of vigor. Surprisingly, it was Flam who was the first to speak this time. "How about it, Miss Trixie? Shall we begin your round?" The heat rose suddenly to Trixie's head again, as the images of Gilda's three-way echoed in her mind. Mustering up all the bravado she could, she proudly stated, "The Grandpapa Trixie is always ready to give it her all, and this is no exception. General Colts, prepare yourselves for pleasure as you've never experienced before." A voice called from down the hall, Lame. God damn it. With a glare towards the interrupter, Trixie continued in a softer voice. Ignore her, and let's begin. The grins on their brothers' faces told her that they were more than ready for round 2. Trixie, however, needed to quickly formulate a strategy. There was no way she'd be able to compete with Gilda's deep throat ability, so her foreplay had to be something even more unique, spectacular, and sexy beyond Flim and Flam's wildest imaginations. Suddenly, an idea sparked in her mind, and she smiled sultrily at the 2 olive-hued brothers. She hopped off the couch and began to approach them when they sat in their separate chairs. They began to move as if they were getting up, but she held up a hoof to keep them in place. No need to move from your seats, boys. Just let the great and powerful Trixie handle it from here. The brothers planted themselves back in place, eagerness evident in both their facial expressions and their stallion hoods, which still stood tall and straight in anticipation. Trixie moved her head to Flim's lap, giving his head a light kiss before wrapping her tongue around the underside of his shaft and slowly dragging it down. The sour taste and smell of Gilda's arousal still lingering on Flim's cock, simultaneously disgusting her and sending a fresh wave of hormonal bliss through her body. She looked over toward Flam, his face a combination of desire and confusion as she finished her tongue's exploration of his brother's member. She pulled her mouth away and said, "Don't worry, I have something very special planned for you." She gave her rump a little shake. "And me?" asked Flim from above. Trixie turned back to face the shaven brother. "You just sit back and relax. Trixie will take care of everything." Flim nodded and did as he was told, leaning his head back against the chair's padding as Trixie took a moment to line herself properly. The strongest smell of sex in the room was driving her mad, begging her to hurry up and let them take her right then and there, however they wanted. Her showmare side shone through. "Showmares, now playing in a theater near you." Her showmare side shone through, and she willed her body to be patient, despite the fact that every heartbeat sent a new burst of desire crashing through her system, threatening to overwhelm her. Finally, she was in position. Ignoring Flim's mere inches from her head for the time being, she slowly lowered her wispy, cornflower blue tail until the tips of her appendage and Flam's slick erection made contact. She gave a satisfied smile as she watched him twitch at the soft touch of the delicate hairs as they brushed against his sensitive head again and again, her tail flicking back and forth over the top of his erect stallion hood. She turned her head back to Flim's stiff erection, still awaiting its share of attention. Trixie relied on instinct to keep her tail busy against Flam's member, sometimes running up and down the length of it, other times enveloping entirely in the soft tangles of two-toned hair, all the while looking Flim as though he were a delicious ice cream bar. Huh. This is actually kind of interesting. Okay then. Anyway. oh yeah. Damn it. And no, I'm not editing this, as I said, because I'm lazy. Besides, do you know how hard it is to type when there's like cum all over your hands? Yeah. While she knew there was no way she could take his length into her mouth as far as Gilda had gone, she was still quite good at providing oral stimulation with her flexible tongue. The grunts and gasps of pleasure from above her and behind her, as well as the steady warmth that started at her heart and spread throughout her entire body, until it all seemed to focus at that point, right between her legs, that had been begging for attention for oh so long. Let her know that she was definitely doing something right. Flam's breathless voice floated quietly through the room. "This is incredible." "Never had a tail job before, eh, brother?" Flim chimed in. "Never one this good," Flim responded, the mustachioed stallion with another grunt. Trixie's head swam as she heard the unshaven pony compliment her ability. The barrier in her mind that held her self-control in place began to develop several large cracks, courtesy of an assault by her pride, and the Azure pony did nothing to stop the onslaught. Little by little, the wall crumbled and fell away. Each exclamation of pleasure coming from the stallion seated behind her, instantly enjoying the view very much, tearing away another chunk. Finally, in a spectacular crash, all her impediments collapsed into a pile of dust, and the tightness in her chest and the never-ending heat that still ran rampant through her entire body became unbearable. She tore her face away from Flim's cock, glistening now with the sheen of her saliva, and gave Flam one last slow brush of her multicolored tail before looking at him with blazing eyes. "Lie down on your back, Flam," she said, her voice firm and unwavering. Without hesitation, the mustachioed pony followed the direction of the show mare, and soon he was flat on his back, his legs splayed out to the side, and his member rising straight up, a testament to his intense arousal. Trixie had moved far beyond just being wet. Soaking was a much more accurate term, as the twin trails of clear liquid that left moist trails down the inside of either leg could attest. Her desperate hunger for intimacy overran all of her other senses, and in no time at all she was poised above Flam. Her more than moist treasure perched atop his sizable stallionhood. Even the slightest bit of contact was enough to make her gasp, and when he began to tease her entrance by tracing its outline with his cock, she cried out as the touch of his exposed skin on hers set up a miniature explosion in her mind. Finally, unable to bear any more torture, she planted her hooves firmly on the ground and lowered herself ever so slowly onto the throbbing member. He was long, yes, but not terribly thick, and as his erection parted her folds, it slid easily into her awaiting nethers, grinding against her inner walls with friction that caused no pain, and so much pleasure. A burst of color exploded behind Trixie's eyes, and she found herself crying out in a wordless scream at the slow penetration brought with it a host of sensations that emanated from within her tight passage, and branched out through her entire body. For a moment she found breathing impossible. An instant later she was gasping as she continued to slip ever downwards, Flam's massive member filling her in a way she'd never been filled before. It made her want this stallion, only this one, to be the one to make love to her from this day until the end of time. The thought had risen quickly, and in any other circumstance, she would have been just as quick to dismiss or suppress it, reminding herself that this is just another rutting she endured for the sake of getting her kicks, in a way that didn't involve her own appendages. This time, however, the idea seemed right, and she closed her eyes as her arm finally made contact with Flam's hips, his entire throbbing stallionhood buried inside her clutching passage. She opened her eyes when she heard Flim's voice. "What about me, Miss Trixie?" He was still seated in his chair, his erection slightly smaller than she remembered it. Trixie opened her mouth and found no words, only a low groan. Thankfully, Flam said from beneath her, his own voice breathy and strained, "Don't think she wants that, Flim." Oh, came the disappointed sound from the blue-balled brother. Came the disappointed sound of the blue-balled brother. He began to slowly stoke his erection, a despondent look on his face as he watched Flam beheld himself in the azure mare. "No need for that," came Gilda's voice in the hall. Trixie turned to see her friend, the griffin's head and neck now damp but clear of any stray flecks of cum. With one swift motion, the half-eagle, half-lion leaped from the floor, and with a flap of her wings, landed on her back on the couch, rear limbs spread out to reveal her treasure, still swollen and ready for more attention. With a claw, she beckoned Flim as she leaned back onto the cushions. "But what about our plan?" asked the clean-shaven unicorn. Trixie could swear she saw his already long member increase in size just a hint as he looked at the griffin splay down on the couch. "Screw it," replied Gilda curtly. It would have probably been a tie anyway, and not like you haven't been making eyes at me all night. She looked down at Trixie and Flam. The stallion's member still completely concealed inside the mare. And you two were the same way. So let's cut the contest crap and get down to business, okay, Flam? Besides, I still need to get off. She stroked her feathered chest with one claw and slowly traced it down her body towards the promised land. This fic is awesome. That was all the inspiration Flim needed. He was off the chair and straddling Gilda almost faster than Trixie could follow. And she giggled as the eager stallion and her friend began to mate once more. Their cries soon filling the room with sound. As the other unicorn's body twitched from laughter, she was suddenly reminded of one undeniable fact. She was still impaled on a Flam. Each spasm of laughter caused her to clench her inner walls, grinding them against his erection and sending shockwaves through her body and into her mind. With a sheepish grin, she looked back to see Flam. His face contorted as the same sensations that racked her body were no doubt doing a number on him. Loud enough to be heard over the shouts of the Griffin and her lover, she said, "Shall we continue then?" With a slight grin, Flam responded, "Straight away, Miss Trixie." She began the motion, lifting her haunches up slowly. A long moan escaped her lips as the friction resumed again, this time intensified, as her inner wall seemed to cling desperately to the stallion hood inside her, the familiar feeling of fullness vanishing as inch after glorious inch of his cock escaped her clutches. Finally, just the head remained, and she felt the longing, an ache, a need to have him inside her again. With every ounce of control she still had, she managed to haltingly lower herself onto his length again, pausing on occasion to gasp for breath as a new round of tangling pleasure rocked her body. Down, then back up, down, then back up. Over and over, Trixie repeated the process, each time a little faster and more intense, while underneath her, Flam moaned softly each time its member slid into the showmare's tight treasure, adding his own thrust to Trixie's vertical motion. She soon found a rhythm, and her rump began to cloud with his hips more and more frequently, her grinding on his cock sending pulses of sheer delight through her nervous system. She could feel her pressure beginning to rise, originating in her passage as its erection continued to slam in and out of it, and she did nothing to hold back or prevent herself from rising to the very brink of orgasm. His grunts started to grow louder and more frequent, and she was sure that he was close as well. With one final long thrust and a mighty shout, she felt his member throb and twitch as it began to coat her inner walls with his payload. Over the edge went Trixie with a scream to match Flam's, her passage tightening as the pressure evaporated in a final rush of overwhelming warmth and pressure that crashed like a wave on the beach and sent her own fluids cascading down over his still pulsing stallion hood. Finally, it was over. A slick popping sound came from her entrance as she rose up and released his rapidly retracting member from her clutches. She glanced over to see that Flam and Gilda had already finished their round of intercourse, and he was lying on his side with her arm looped around his barrel, stroking the olive coat idly with her claw, wide smiles on both their faces. With a sigh, Trixie turned around and rolled onto her back, next to Flam, who simply stared at the ceiling and drew in long, deep breaths. For a while, Trixie did the same, the afterglow taking control of her faculties, until she felt the hoof wrap itself around her. She looked over and saw Flam's smiling face. His eyes soft and warm as they had been the whole night, and she felt her heart skip a beat. Realizing that she had failed to do so already, Trixie leaned in for a kiss, and the olive unicorn gladly returned it, their tongues quickly meeting and dancing about intricately beneath their locked lips. The thick red mustache tickled the area around Trixie's lips, and she smiled as the facial hair rubbed against her again and again. Gilda broke the silence. You guys should totally come with us on the road. Slim said in a faraway voice, "Maybe we should, if this would be a regular occurrence." "You bet your flank it would!" shouted Gilda. Trixie pulled away from the kiss and added, It would be rather pleasant if Trixie could have a regular partner for a change." She nestled Flam and said, Trixie hopes you will consider this offer." "We certainly will," replied Flam. "Won't we, Flam?" "Yes, indeed, Flam," his brother said in that same distant tone. The four of them, 3 tired ponies and an exhausted Griffin, late in the living room, one by one drifting off to sleep until only Trixie remained awake. She smiled as she nestled deeper into the embrace of Flam. "Who knows what will happen tomorrow," she thought, but at least we had tonight." With one last nuzzle of the olive coat, Trixie closed her eyes and joined her 3 companions in peaceful slumber. Well, that was surprisingly well written. Damn. I can clop to this. Well, then again, I already did. There's like cum all over my keyboard right now. No, like, but seriously though, like, this is a really good Clopfic. Like, it takes a stupid concept. Well, then again, that's what but it takes this weird concept of Gilda, Trixie, and Flam having a foursome, and it turns it into something that's you're able to clop to, something that's well written. I give this 5 clops out of 5. Yeah. Yeah, like, this is a fic that you can definitely clop to, and I highly suggest you do read it and clop to it if you're into that sort of thing, because this was a really good clop fic. Yeah.